At the flick of a button, this 32-inch gamer monitor from LG can go from being 4K ultra high definition 240Hz to 1080p 480Hz. Complicated name aside, meet LG's UltraGear gamer monitor. This is the 32-inch GS95UE-B. Yeah, gaming monitors really are hard to remember when it comes to the name. And I've had it for a few days, so this is gonna be more like a short experience review. And whether this is for me or not, and why I think this is just such an interesting proposition for specific people. But yeah, this might be a specific use case that might benefit me, but yeah, let's talk more about my experience with it. Yes, you heard me correctly. This is a dual mode, dual native resolution, and dual native high refresh rate monitor. First resolution being 3840 by 2160, and then you've got a 1080p resolution. That 1080p resolution goes up to 480Hz, and then the 4K resolution at 240Hz. It's just crazy to think that this is where we are right now. Now, the 32-inch size, the canvas is brilliant, but is this really for me, and who is this for? Well, let's break it down. Starting with the design, I do like the design. It is a flat panel design, and then it does have a curved back, and I think this is where it houses obviously the cooling, as well as the components that really drive the monitor. And then of course, when it comes to what you have, it is a very clean and sleek design. It does have an LED strip at the back. This is something that you can control in the on-screen display switch, which is very easy to navigate. You've got a joystick that actually navigates it, which is really great to see. I would love to actually take a remote instead, but you know what? The joystick is very straightforward. And all the settings and features that you have in there to pretty much work with is there. So again, this isn't going to be a technical review. I don't really have the components and the capacity for that. And this monitor has been out for a while, so there's much more and many more technical reviews that you can actually watch online. So I'm more just focusing on this being my experience with it as I'm going through. So the design of it is really good. When you're putting it together, the assembly is just very straightforward. It's a toolless setup, 3-piece, and the stand is great in terms of how sturdy it is, as you can see, and it tilts, rotates one direction, and also you do have height adjustment. So the flexibility out of the box is really good, but of course you can VESA mount it as well, which is something I recommend if you've got the space and the capacity for it. Now the ports here are par for the course and what you should be expecting, which is one DisplayPort 1.4. This does support display stream compression. That's what you get with the DSC, and that's how I was able to actually push to the high resolution at 4K and 240Hz, or else if you do disable it, which you can do, you are limited to the 120, 144Hz as expected. And then you've got two HDMI 2.1 ports. I believe this is the full bandwidth, 48 gigabits per second, but correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. And then you've got two USB-A ports that act as a hub. Now, this is where for me, as someone that uses a MacBook on a daily basis, I would have loved to see support for a USB-C port for DisplayPort output when it comes to Thunderbolt. So that's another thing to consider. And there isn't a KVM switch. So for the price, you are really paying for the dual mode native resolution and high refresh rate options that you've got at 240Hz and 480Hz at 1080p and 4K UHD 2160p. But yeah, I would have loved to have seen USB-C and a KVM switch, but yeah, that's the ports that you're pretty much getting on here. Display and audio. Now, of course, let's start with the display, and that is the highlight of it. 32 inches, two native resolutions, two native high refresh rates, 480Hz at 1080p and 240Hz at 2160p 4K UHD ultra high definition, all on an OLED panel. LG's W OLED panel is just ridiculously good when it comes to color reproduction. Of course, I don't have the technical gubbins to really test it, but you just got to take my word for it. Once you see it, this type of image quality that you're getting is just crazy. Now, of course, you can use your current gen consoles such as the PS5, PS5 Pro, Series S and X and really enjoy it because of the HDMI 2.1 specification. But the real experience of this is on PC because of the DSC support, 240Hz, 480Hz at that 4K and 1080p. This is where it really, really shines. Now, when it comes to the image quality, what do I personally prefer? For my use case, I'm sticking to the 4K UHD 240Hz. I appreciate the 480Hz. Now look, certain games do push that, but you need a heavy system. The system that I was pushing on here was my AMD-based RX 7800 XT GPU. And of course, it did do the job. But that's specific games like esports. Now, I loaded up Counter-Strike 2. I haven't had a chance to actually play Counter-Strike in a long time. I'm really coming back from a Counter-Strike source, gameplay back in the day, as well as Global Offensive. So Counter-Strike 2 was interesting to load up, and boy, I'd lost my touch, but in no time, I kind of felt like I was getting my mojo back. And it was just interesting to see such a high refresh rate and FPS on the display, getting close to that 480 frames, 480 hertz refresh rate at that 1080p resolution was just crazy. And the responsiveness when I was playing such a game was great. But if I'm gonna be honest with you, the type of games that I prefer to play when I've got the time to are very narrative driven games, platform games, racing games, those type of games, fighting games. And for me personally, I value the crisper, higher resolution, and the 240 hertz refresh rate is more than fast enough for someone like me. So, legacy games that I still enjoy playing, like Project Cars 2, when it comes to story narrative driven games like God of War, Ratchet and Clank, Spider-Man, those type of games on this display at 4K with the right graphics and all the new features when it comes to upscaling like FSR, as well as, things like DLSS and XeSS, really just make a nice experience on this because you're still able to push into the triple digits FPS. So that's where, for me, I would be using this. I don't really play esports games as regularly as I would like. And that dip in image clarity, although it's still native at that display canvas, is something that you notice. Now, LG does have a windowed mode at 27 inches and 24 inches to kind of mimic what you would expect from esports at that size. But again, you've got a 32-inch monitor, you kind of want to use the whole canvas. So I do love the dual mode, but me personally, I would be using the native 4K with the 240 hertz on a regular basis. I just really like the look of it. And on this OLED panel, the ultra fast response, the deep blacks, the contrast, and the accurate colors while still being vibrant, and the brightness that comes from it when it comes to HDR support, and all the VRR and the variable sync that you get with it, adaptive. Yeah, the display experience, is definitely something that's up there. Now, you'd think the overall display experience is what really took my breath away and surprised me the most, but it's actually the built-in speakers for this monitor. It feels like it's actually coming through the screen. Whatever LG have done with this, I really appreciate, because most of the time, I would actually feel comfortable using the built-in speakers on this monitor. And that's something that I think should really follow suit on a regular basis. I really respect it. The audio quality, when it comes to the built-in speakers on this monitor, they're really good. They're the ones that surprise me the most, next to just the top tier image quality. Now, I didn't do much productivity on this monitor, but like I said, in this short space of time, this display canvas, the OLED panel, the quality of the 4K resolution, and the refresh rate, this is a display I can feel very confident using for productivity on a regular basis. I just personally wish, because I'm working a lot more on my Mac and also balancing it out with my PC, I wish it did have more support in terms of display output over USB-C with DisplayPort. But again, this is just something to take into consideration. But for productivity, this is a monitor that I can feel very confident using on a regular basis. Now, wrapping it up, what's my conclusion and recommendation for this monitor? If we actually look at when this monitor first came out, boy, it was asking a lot. Like $1,500, $1,400, around there in the equivalent for UK pounds and euros. It was a lot, but it made sense because for those that actually valued having that 480 hertz mode at 1080p, if you're really into your esports games, like your Counter-Strikes, your Rainbow Six Sieges, your Overwatches, and those type of games, yeah, you could value having that because you don't have to have a separate monitor to really enjoy it, and it's all built into one. But then again, right now, if you're watching this around this time, 2024, end of November, Black Friday period, the price on this is actually really good, a good amount below what it was before. And I think it actually dips below £1,000, $1,000. If that's the case, boy, this is a very, very good and high recommend. So that really wraps it in. What mode am I really going to be benefiting when I'm using this? Like I said, I prefer the high resolution at the 240 hertz. I do appreciate the 1080p 480, but again, I prefer the clarity. And of course, that kind of resolution and clarity at this canvas at 32 inches just makes sense. But overall, I appreciate this technology that is going into such a monitor. And this is definitely a high recommend, especially at the price you can get it right now.